Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I am Andrew. I'm gonna turn my volume up a little bit. I am Andrew, aka Dexter Mindgasms, and I'm going to talk about the new show, Dexter New Blood, Season 1, which I think possibly might be the only season. Spoiler alert, kind of. Uh, but apparently there could possibly be another season, but I'll talk about that at the end of this. So anyway, as you can see, I have in the title there, will the show end? Dexter's son, serial killer versus serial killer. So um, I guess before I get into more detail, the main things that happen in the show are Hmm. Well, I guess I'll get to that. A reason for why the show could definitely end, and one of the main things that happens that it occurs pretty much at the start of the show is that Dexter's son Harrison comes home and finds him, and he's been hiding. And in this sense that of serial killer versus serial killer, that's Dexter versus Kurt, whose son he kills. So there's a little bit of a teaser there for you. So I know this is like I guess there's a you could see you could say that there's some controversy about this show, and um, it's it's debatable whether it was a good idea to bring Dexter back as a character. It's hard to say, right? And so hopefully you can see that there. Um, so yeah, obviously that's a really good image there, Dexter with blood on him in a garbage bag. And I have that in my thumbnail here with Dexter looking at Harrison because um oh yeah, that's because Harrison. So Dexter reveals, this is a big spoiler too, but Dexter reveals his secret to Harrison. So that's why I put in my thumbnail for this video. I made it look like Dexter is looking at Harrison as a big spoiler there. For um, as you can see there, Dexter, as if he's looking at Harrison. He's got blood on him, and he's got a body in some garbage bags. And basically, he debates throughout a whole lot of the show um, whether to share the secret of his dark passenger with Harrison. And he really struggles with it a lot. And he talks about it with his hallucinations of his dead family members, like how he did in the earliest show with Harry, of course, right? So yeah, another thing that happens in the show is, well, actually, first. I'll go into a little bit more of um, what happens with Harrison. So that's Harrison there. I wonder if it's even the same actor. I actually didn't look that up because it kind of, uh, it could be any actor, really, of course, but it looks like it could be the actual kid from the original Dexter series. But that's him there, and that's Dexter, and obviously everyone says that he looks older. And then that's Angela. So she's the sheriff in the small town where Dexter lives, and he lives in a small town. I'm not sure if it's. I guess you would have to assume that it's Alaska because it's still technically in America. But basically, he lives in a small, isolated town in Alaska, and he's dating her, who is the chief of police, Angela. And so Harrison gets there, and as I said, he's it, basically Harrison has been kind of traveling around the world from, I think it was Argentina, where um where Hannah, yeah, it was Argentina where Hannah had Harrison, and so he left there after Hannah died, and he basically slowly looked for his dad, and he eventually found him, posing as the name James Lindsay, which is funny because the author of the Dexter books, his name is Jim Lindsay. So that's funny that he Dexter's alias is the name of the author. So, like I said, he instead of talking to Harry in Dexter New Blood as opposed to the original Dexter series, he talks to Deborah because she dies at the end of the original series, right? So she is basically his conscience in this case instead of Harry. So when Harrison gets into town, she is trying to convince Dexter to do what he did, which was his initial response to Harrison finding him, which was to reject him and deny that he is even actually related to him. And so so he's basically having a conversation with her as a hallucination about that because he really wants to welcome him in as his son. And basically she convinces him to do that at first, but then his but basically I guess you could kind of say the will of his dark passenger is so strong that it convinces him to do otherwise because a theme of the show that we get into even more, especially at the end of this season or perhaps even this series, is that Dexter's dark passenger, as Harrison says later in the season, it's not a passenger, it's fucking driving. So there's Harry there who basically gave Dexter the code of Harry, as we know, right? So his morals for who he chooses, who he kills. So he kills people like pedophiles and people who slip through the cracks, quote unquote, so to speak, like murderers and rapists and pedophiles who end up getting off scot free under the power of the legal and justice system. So that's another interesting aspect of this show. So, like I said, Dexter is dating Angela, who is the chief of police in the small town where Dexter is living under the assumed alias of Jeff Lindsay, and he's working at a I think it's basically like a gun and hunting supply shop. And he's because he's such a manipulative psychopath, he's being being the friendly town guy who's just does good things for people, and he's even fooled the chief of police Angela about his true identity. So he's done a good job of hiding so far, and instead of killing people, he's been he's been stalking and hunting deer, and he does that like I said, he does that instead of killing people. And he comes across a kid who's a troublemaker named Matt Caldwell, and I'll go to that here. And basically, he's like a troublemaker, but he's also the son of the town rich guy who owns the truck stop in town, and it's such a small town that this is the biggest business there. So that's Matt Caldwell who goes to the shop trying to buy a gun from Dexter, and he tries to do it without going through his security clearance. And then he Dexter turns him down, but he just ends up buying one illegally anyway, and he shoots a deer. He shoots one of the deer that Dexter was stalking, and it pisses him so off so much that he snaps and then he kills him. And that's the first kill of the season, which I'm glad of because uh, I thought it was going to turn into some like YA young adult teen angsty thing at first. I was a little bit worried because we had Harrison come to town And for a while, when he first got there, it seemed like we were focusing way too much on him and not enough on Dexter. And then also, we have Harrison meeting Angela's kid here, and they go to high school together. And Dexter's son Harrison, he is actually blending in surprisingly well, which is why Dexter is debating so much with his hallucination of Deborah about whether he should tell Harrison the truth about his dark passenger. And he really wants to, but he listens to Deborah, which is basically his conscience at first, for sure. And so another thing that happens is that there's a true crime podcaster who comes into town to investigate, and she's really annoying, of course, and she is badgering Angela, the chief of police and Dexter's girlfriend, all the time to give her basically facts about uh, what was revealed to be Matt Caldwell's murder. And so she's being really nosy and trying to figure out what has gone on, so she can make a spicy true crime podcast about it, of course, right? And then we also have Matt Caldwell's father, Kurt, get involved, and it's interesting because he ends up being the other serial killer in the show who Dexter is kind of fighting, and that's basically what they end up doing. They end up fighting each other, and so Kurt Caldwell is Matt Caldwell's father, and Matt Caldwell is the person who Dexter killed, right? And Kurt Caldwell slowly figures it out, and then he kind of manipulates him into a scheme, and it ends up involving Harrison. And we end up finding out that Kurt himself has been a serial killer for 25 years, and he's also connected to Angela, the chief of police, and Dexter's girlfriend, because he killed Angela's friend who disappeared when she was a teenager. But then after her, he kept killing people for 25 years after that. So there's also one of the only, because it's such a small town, one of the only other about maybe 3 to 5, so maybe a handful of cops at the most in town is Officer Logan, and he also runs the high school wrestling team. So as soon as Harrison gets into town, he recruits Harrison into the wrestling team, and he gets involved later on with helping to contain Dexter when he actually ends up getting arrested. Big spoiler there that I'll get into more in a little bit here too. But ends up being one of the reasons um, that Harrison declines, basically. So another thing that is revealed that Dexter was very worried about is that Harrison would turn out as just as much of a broken monster as he was, because Dexter was born in blood, as he says, because his mother was murdered in front of him with a chainsaw, and then he sat in her blood for days on end, right? And we find out that as Dexter was worried about, his worst fear has been confirmed, which he secretly wants, as we find out, which is that Harrison remembers the truth, which is that, as we know from the original series, Rita, Dexter's wife, and Harrison's mother, was for Dexter could kill Trinity. And if you remember in that episode, John Lithgow, who plays the Trinity killer, he uh, he falls off of a building that's under construction, and Dexter Dexter grabs his hand because he's stalking him, and he wants to save him so he can kill him himself. So it's him it was him making the mistake of allowing the Trinity killer to live. That is the reason that Rita ended up getting killed. And, all that stuff happened with Dexter leaving Harrison. And so Dexter is slowly figuring out that Harrison is basically just as traumatized and scarred and broken and has just as violent of urges as he had from having as he says having been born in blood. So we see these dark and violent urges of Harrison manifested by a stabbing incident at school. So he rejects the cool kids who were bullying this outcast nerdy kid and becomes friends with the outcast nerdy kid, which makes Dexter think that Harrison is actually well adjusted and normal. But then there's this stabbing incident at school, and Harrison's explanation doesn't make sense to Dexter given his experience as a blood spatter analyst in the Miami police, right? So he this is the scene where he's miming what Harrison said happened in the stabbing incident with Ethan, and he said that he did it because Ethan was planning a terrorist attack, like a bomb attack on the school, and killing everyone for making fun of him. And Ethan and or no, Harrison says that Ethan came at him with a knife, and then he stopped him and he almost killed Ethan and he put him in the hospital, but Harrison was okay. But Dexter thinks that he was actually lying and he attacked Ethan first because he had a violent and dark urge, and then he cut himself after as a self-inflicted wound and just claimed that Ethan had tried to stab him first so it could look like he was in the defense rather than the offense, which was the truth, right? And it turns out that Dexter is right about this, but but Harrison gets really mad at first, um, because he says that his dad should trust him about this, but it turns out that it was actually that he was right, and as he says later on, he was just afraid of admitting it to Dexter because he's afraid of admitting that he has dark and violent urges all the time. This is him in his wrestling gear, and before he's about to do another one of the violent things that he does, which is when he's in a wrestling match, he gets a guy in an arm bar who taps out, and then he he breaks his arm even after he's tapped out, which is a clearly obviously violent thing to do, right? And but so these are there are more and more of these signs that Dexter notices, and there's another terrible event that happens at school, which is that because all the popular kids at school want to celebrate Harrison for him having saved them by stabbing Ethan. So they go to a party and there's a lot of drinking and drug use. And Harrison passes out, and there has to be an ambulance. And Logan, the cop, shows up there. And it turns out that Harrison drank and he also had Oxycontin, but it, of course, had fentanyl in it. So this is a small picture here, but uh, Dexter finds this guy. He finds this the drug dealer who gave the drugs to the guy who had them at the party. But the cops show up just before Dexter is about to inject that drug dealer with ketamine and kidnap him to murder him. So he finds out who the guy's supplier is, and then he goes to his house and he murders him, um, expecting Logan to not be that quick on the case because it was a weekend and it would take a long time for lab results of evidence to go through that they had. And Angela, his girlfriend, who's the chief of police, she was at a conference, where she was at a conference where she ran into Angel Bautista, who you probably remember from the original series. Um, and he looks obviously he looks older, in this because everyone looks older because they are all older. As you can see, a lot of people comment on that with Dexter, and I noticed that at first, but you get used to it. But obviously, Angel looks way older here too, right? Especially when you see him later on in one of the episodes with his hat off, and he's got even less hair, and it's basically going more white instead of gray now. So but so Dex, anyway, back to Harrison. So he ends up being okay from the drug overdose, but Dexter kills that drug dealer, like I said, right? And he still but he still manages to get away just in time because Logan and the other cops show up at this drug dealer's house right as Dexter's about to stab him. So instead, he makes it look like an overdose and feeds him a whole bunch of crushed up oxycontin with his knife and makes him overdose. And then he puts him in a chair and he makes it look like an accidental overdose death, and then escapes right in the nick of time, basically. And um, so there's also the way that there's an interesting aspect about how how that character Kurt kills, who, if you remember, is the father of Matt Caldwell, who Dexter killed. He he basically mimes the like Dexter does, kind of. He kind of mimes the circumstances of his first kill. So what he does is he he dresses up in one of those snowsuits where you're all in white gear, and then he gets a sniper rifle with a laser scope on it because the first time what is revealed that happens for the circumstances of his first kill is that, like I said, he kills Angela's friend who went missing when she was a teenager, and he he gave her a ride in his big truck because he thought that his father would be after her because when he was a kid, his mother left her father and him, so his father had to take him on vacation or take him working with him because he was a trucker and he traveled all around a lot. So his dad was a psychopath who had violent urges too, and he would pick up hookers when he was working and just beat them up, and he would sit in the front of the truck, but the Kurt, as a child, would sit in the front of the truck, but he would still hear what was going on. So when when he picks up Angela's friend, she basically gets freaked out by him anyway and gets out of the truck, and she's running away, and then he shoots her with a sniper rifle. So that's why with all of his kills from now on, he kidnaps them, and then at some point he lets them go and he shoots them with his sniper rifle. And we see him do that with one other girl during one of the episodes, and also in one of the episodes, uh, I forget who it is, but some people basically stumble upon the body of Angela's friend who went missing when when she was a teenager. But anyway, Angela, with the help of Angel, eventually she finds out she starts to suspect Dexter because earlier on, I forget what it is exactly, but something that Angel says clues Angela into the fact that Dexter, because we know that he faked his own death in the original show, that Dexter is still alive and that he actually is James Lindsay or Jim Lindsay, who is her boyfriend up where she is the chief of police. So she suspects him and she keeps investigating him and gets more and more evidence. And at one point, she discovers that he is Dexter Morgan, but nothing about him being a serial killer, just that he is Dexter Morgan and he faked his own death. But eventually, she ends up arresting him because her hunches about him turn out to be correct. And so Kurt Kurt is after Dexter, and he basically is courting Harrison and trying to be like a father figure to him to lure him to his cabin where he brings his victims who he's kidnapped before he kills them. So he becomes friends with him, and then Harrison goes there, and Dexter comes to save him just in the nick of time, just before Kurt is about to kill him when he kicks him out of his house and he tells him to run, and he has his sniper rifle on him. Dexter saves him right in time, and right after that, Angela starts to suspect Dexter too much because she wonders why Kurt is after him, and it turns out that Kurt also burned down Dexter's cabin where he lives, and we find out that it's likely him that killed Matt Caldwell because she sees a link with an injection mark on his neck in comparison um to Matt, the one on Matt Caldwell's neck, and also the drug dealer who Dexter injected ketamine with, or he was about to inject him with ketamine and kidnap him and murder him before the cops showed up and stopped him, which is why he ended up killing that supplier for the drug dealer instead of the drug dealer who sold the drugs to the guy who had them at the party where Harrison OD'd and ended up in the hospital. So Angela starts to suspect that he killed that drug dealer and Matt Caldwell because of the link between the injection marks. And she compares these cases to the Bay Harbor Butcher cases because that true crime podcaster I mentioned, she investigated the Bay Harbor Butcher, and that, as she's pointed out on her true crime podcast, that was one detail that was overlooked by the police, which is why she thinks that it isn't true that Sergeant James Stokes was the Bay Harbor Butcher, as we know that that Dexter framed him for being that when he disappeared and assumed a new alias. But anyway, she ends up arresting Dexter and suspecting him of the truth of actually being the Bay Harbor Butcher, but he continues to deny it. Um, and by this point, this was actually right after Dexter finally caught Kurt and killed him, and this was after this was also after Dexter admitted to Harrison right after he rescued him from Kurt, um, that that he also had dark dark urges like him, and hmm and that he has what he calls a dark passenger, which is obviously his his kind of like voice in him that tells him to kill. And so Dexter Dexter basically he's trying to find Kurt because he's told Harrison at this point that he stalks people and he confronts them and he stops them from ever hurting people again. But he hasn't told them yet that he has killed these people. But at one point, when they get here, uh, Dexter takes Harrison with him, and they discover basically Kurt's murder museum because all along the walls here are all of Kurt's victims. So he's been killing women for years, and you see in the show they show that he's been skinning them and keeping their skin too. So it's super fucked up, of course, right? So this is where basically after this happens, uh, basically Dexter uses Harrison as bait. Harrison goes to Kurt's house, who has already killed him, if you can remember. And then Dexter injects him with ketamine. They kidnap him and they take him to the Murder Museum. And this is my favorite Harris. This is my favorite episode because it's so fucked up, just like the show. The second last episode was definitely my favorite one. Dexter kills Kurt in front of Harrison as a way to bond with him through them both having dark passengers, which made me so excited in such a fucked up way, which is why it's such a great show, right? Because it's so fucked up. So basically, Dexter is taking Harrison, under his dark passenger's wing, right? And it's sad too because this ends up being false because what happens is that after Dexter gets arrested, he ends up fooling Logan into letting him escape. But the only way that he can do it is by killing Logan. And he's been selling this bullshit about the Dark Passenger to Harrison by saying that, I only kill people who deserve it. And because he's very pro capital punishment, of course. And so, but he kills Logan to escape. And he said himself to Logan because he was showing him more sympathy than Angelo was after he got arrested. That he said verbatim, "You're a good man, Logan." So Dexter noticed that, or no, Harrison noticed because when Dexter escaped, he called Harrison on his cell phone and told him to get his truck and reach him at the place where that deer had been killed because he took him there before. And so he takes him there and then Dexter tries to get him to escape with him. And but then Harrison questions, "Wait, how did you escape? Why did you call me from Logan's cell phone?" And this is where Dexter tells him the truth and he said, I had to kill him. It was the only way to escape." And Harrison is so shocked. This is the big, massive shocker of the season. At the end of the last episode, instead of escaping with Dexter, Harrison confronts Dexter and tells him, "You're a monster," and tells him the truth. And Dexter is so struck by this because he knows that he's a murderous monster uh, Dexter that Dexter agrees to not make him go with him, so he starts to run away, and then he hears Harrison cock his gun because Harrison brought the sniper rifle that Dexter had gotten him for Christmas as a way to shoot over their predatory dark passenger bonding. And Dexter turns around and then he just willingly lets Harrison shoot him. And then, so what happens after Harrison kills his own father, kills Dexter, because he rejects as much of a monster as Dexter himself is. Angela shows up there because she's realized that Logan is dead, as she was away trying to catch Kurt because she still thought he was alive. So she comes and sees Harrison right after he's killed Dexter, and he says, "He killed Logan." Like he's so shocked by what he did because he didn't actually want to kill anyone. He just had dark urges, but they weren't as dark and monstrous as Dexter's urges. So, what's interesting is that she gets him to go into Dexter's truck and he lets him escape, and she says that she'll lie and uh, to never come back here again, and she'll say that she never saw him and that she killed Dexter, which is going to be hard to pull off because she's going to have to say that she shot him with a sniper rifle that Harrison used, right? Because it's a different caliber from her standard issue pistol, which she would have used if it had been her. But so she has to come up to with some sort of excuse to have used the sniper rifle. So anyway, yeah, Harrison kills Dexter instead of joining him as a serial killer sidekick. And then Angela lets him escape. And also, Angel Bautista is on his way up because Angela told her about the evidence that she had gotten about Dexter and that he was still alive and her theories about him being a serial killer and the Bay Harbor Butcher. So Dexter dies, Harrison escapes, Angel is on his way, and that's why I think there might only be one season of this new Dexter spinoff. And if there is, I would be happy with that, to be honest, because like, why would you continue Dexter without Dexter? Is it even really Dexter? And I looked this up, and apparently the creator of the new show, Dexter New Blood, said that Dexter is definitely dead. He wouldn't say, "Oh no, this is a fake death." He wouldn't do that to the audience, but apparently there's a possibility that there could be a new show about Harrison. I would still watch that for sure, but I don't see how it could be as good as Dexter. And anyway, overall, I do think the original Dexter show, my dog's name is Dexter and he thinks I'm talking to him. I do think the original Dexter show is better than Dexter New Blood, but Dexter New Blood is definitely worth watching if you haven't already. And obviously, you've gotten major spoilers if you've watched this, as you've probably already seen it rather. So anyway, I've talked about this long enough. It's hard to sum up a like I think it's a 9 episode season in a short period of time, so I did my best job. So anyway, yeah, a lot of really interesting and exciting stuff happens in the show. If you haven't watched it, definitely watch it. If you have seen it, watch it again. Tell me what you think about my opinions or about it, just things that happen in the show in the comments. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching. For next video, probably will be this weekend podcast about either Dark Tower 2, the drawing of the three in Stephen King's Dark Tower fantasy horror western series, which we were going to do last weekend. It'll either be that or we're going to talk about the Snyder cut of Justice League, the 4 hour long DC superhero movie. And yeah, like I always say, um, click that like button, subscribe, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Uh, Check out my Patreon. Even $1 a month is greatly appreciated. The link is in the description as always. And as I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And watch Dexter and Dexter New Blood. They're fucking awesome shows, and Dexter is my favorite serial killer. All right. Thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.